everybody, welcome. My name is Bill Buckhalter. You can find me online on Facebook and YouTube as Buck Wiley DM, and this is Monster Making 101. What I'm going to be doing with this video series is teaching you how to make custom monsters for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I've been playing D&D for over 30 years, and ever since I first started as a DM when I was 13 years old using my original monster manual, this is it right here. One of my favorite things to do was to pour through the pages of this book and look for really interesting monsters and find ways that I could use them to challenge my players. Today, I do the same thing in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This is my monster manual. As you can see, I've got lots of tabs here. There's pages falling out. This thing's very well used. But sometimes I need a monster that challenges my players more than what is in the book. Or maybe I have a picture of a monster or an idea from a video game or from a movie of a monster I'd like to create. Sometimes I just have a miniature that I need to make a monster for, and there's nothing in the book for it. For example, here's a miniature that I picked up at Gen Con a couple of years ago. When I saw this, I thought, man, that's a really cool monster. My players would really enjoy fighting something like that. It looks really cool. But of course, this monster is not in the monster manual, so I had to come up with something special just for this monster. At the time, I was running a campaign that was centered around demons, so I wanted to do something with this creature that would make a demon out of it. Today, what I'm going to do is walk you through the process that I use to create a monster out of this miniature right here. And when we're done, we'll have a fully fleshed out creature that you can use in your games. So before we get started building this creature, the first thing we have to do is ask ourselves some questions. What exactly do we want our creature to do? What do we expect this creature to do? Okay, so looking at our miniature, the first thing that I think of when I look at this is this looks like a burrowing creature of some kind, right? And as a matter of fact, if you look this up online, this is actually a Pathfinder miniature, and it's the Pathfinder version of an Ankeg, which is a Dungeons & Dragons creature that burrows. So that makes a lot of sense. We'll expect this to be a burrowing creature. I also noticed that it has some hard plates on the back here, so I would expect this creature to have a pretty high armor class. The creature also has some mandibles here. We'll probably work that into the attacks. It looks like it's got a good horn on it there. I have some ideas, some other things that I'd like to do with this that will work into our design. So before we get started, I want to show you a program that I use every time I make a custom creature. I find this program to be super helpful. It's a great tool, and I highly recommend it to everybody. It's called the Monster Maker. You can get this from a website called thegeniusinc.com. I'm going to put a link in the description to the builder where you can download it. I also recommend that while you're there, maybe toss a buck or two to the developers. That will hopefully encourage them to continue to support this program because it really is a really valuable tool. So the first thing we're going to do here is give our monster a name. This creature, I wanted it to be a demon for the campaign that I was running at the time. And as we said, it looks like it's a burrowing creature. So we're going to call this a Hellspawn Burrower. Okay, that sounds demonic enough. Next, underneath here, you'll see you can pick the creature's gender. Gender doesn't matter here. We'll just make it neutral. The size of the creature, we're going to make it large. That's based on the miniature that we have here is a large miniature. For the creature type, we're going to choose Fiend because, again, this is a demon, and that's demons fall into the Fiend category. And we're going to pick for the tag is Demon. Now for alignment, of course, because it is a demon, it will be Chaotic Evil. And for now, we're going to skip over armor class and hit points for just a minute. And I want to go all the way down to the bottom here to where it says challenge rating. Okay. And I am going to pick a challenge rating of 5. This is a drop down. You can pick everything from 0 all the way up to 30. I'm going to pick a challenge rating of 5. And why do I pick a challenge rating of 5? Well, if you know anything about 5th edition and the way monsters are created, challenge rating 5 is kind of that first step up, what I would consider a tier 2 creature. That's where the proficiency bonus bumps from a +2 to a +3. We're going to go with a challenge rating 5. And what I like about the builder is you can see as I hover over the challenge rating, it will tell me what the kind of expected values are for a creature of that challenge rating. So as I hover over there, it says that a CR5 creature will have an armor class of 15, that it will have an attack bonus of 6, and if it has any saving throws, the DC is usually going to be about 15. Also, it says that low-end hit points would be 131, high-end hit points would be 145. So for a challenge rating 5 creature, we're going to try to get in that ballpark. Now I'm going to move up to ability scores next. So just like a character, a monster is going to have ability scores as well. And again, looking at our monster, what would we expect those ability scores to be? Well, this particular monster looks like it would probably be fairly strong. It's going to be burrowing through the earth. So we're going to want it to have a fairly high strength. So let's go ahead and give it a strength of 16. And dexterity, it doesn't look like it's a very nimble creature. So we'll give it a moderate dexterity. We'll say 12. Constitution, it looks like it's pretty tough, so we'll give it a constitution of 14. Doesn't look very smart. We will give it only an intelligence of, we'll give it an intelligence of 3. It's a very unintelligent creature. Wisdom of 10, that seems fine. Charisma, again, it doesn't seem very charismatic. We'll give it a charisma of 8. So I just pulled a whole bunch of numbers out of the air. Where did I get these numbers? Well, these are numbers that I feel comfortable with because I've created a lot of different creatures. I know how these numbers work. I know what I expect and what I want out of the creature. So I just pulled a bunch of numbers out of the air. But as you start to build creatures, one of the things you can do is go back to the monster manual and find a similar creature to the one that you're trying to build and compare the statistics of that creature to the one that you're trying to build and get somewhere in the ballpark. You can use examples of other creatures to give you an idea of where your stats should be. But there's no rule that says your stats have to be one thing or another. If you want your creature to be super, super strong, there's nothing stopping you from giving it a strength of 20 or 22. You can make the statistics whatever you want to make them. You just have to balance everything out and make sure that your creature isn't overpowered and too much of a challenge for your players. So now that we have our ability scores, we're going to go back up to armor class and hit points that we skipped earlier. Okay, as the challenge rating down here suggested, the armor class for a CR5 creature should be 15. In this case, it's showing 16 right now because we made the dexterity 12. So it's taking that 15 and it's adding our dexterity modifier. It's making the armor class 16. But I'm going to bump that up even more. I'm going to make that 17, right? Because again, as we were looking at this creature, it's got a lot of really hard armor plates on top of the creature. So I would expect it to have a pretty high armor class. So I'm going to bump that up even higher. I'm going to make that 17. What I like to do for hit points is this first field right here is the number of hit dice that your monster is going to have. In general, I like to make the hit dice be twice as many as the challenge rating. So if I have a challenge rating 5 creature, I like to start with 10 hit dice. Okay, this is not a hard and fast rule. Okay, to quote Jeffrey Rush from one of my favorite movies ever, this is more a set of guidelines, really. There's nothing that could stop you from making the hit dice 15 or 20. You can make it as many or as few as you like. But in the end, you're going to have to balance all this out to make sure that your challenge rating is still accurate. And we'll show you how to do that at the end here. I've chosen 10 hit dice The actual die is going to be a D10. Why? Well, because we are a large creature. Large creatures have a D10 for their hit dice, medium creatures have a D8 for their hit dice, and small creatures have a D6. Where do I get all this information? Well, once again, this all comes straight out of the monster manual. If you've never paid any attention to the first section of the monster manual, if you've always just dove in and started looking at the stat blocks, the introduction is about 7 or 8 pages long, and there's some really great information in here that talks about how all the statistics for the monsters are figured out. So the next thing we do is we hit this generate hit points button, and it tells us that our creature is going to have 75 hit points, okay? Well, how does it come about, that number 75? Well, what it does is it takes the average number for a D10, which is 5.5, right? If you take the lowest number that you could possibly roll on a D10, which is a 1, and you add it to the highest number, which is a 10, you get 11. You divide that by 2 for the average, and you get 5.5. So you take the number of hit dice, which is 10, times the average, 5.5, and that gives you 55. Then you take the number of hit dice and you multiply it by your Constitution modifier. In this case, our Constitution modifier is +2. So 10 times 2 is 20. You add that to the 55, and you get 75. That's how it calculates the hit points. You didn't think this was going to be a math lesson, did you? So 75 hit points seems a little low. When we look back down here, they say that the low end, we should be at about 131, right? So we might not have enough hit points there. That might be a good indicator to us that we want to up our number of hit dice. So if we up that to, let's say, 15 and regenerate our hit points, now we're at 112 hit points. Well, that's still not a lot, but I'm going to leave it there for a minute, and I'll explain why later. Trust me on this. So next up we have our speeds. This creature has a speed of 30. That's a standard speed, but you notice there's other kinds of speeds here. Swim speed, fly speed, burrow speed. Hey, we want a burrowing creature, so let's give it a burrowing speed. Let's change that to 60. This creature is going to be really, really good at burrowing underground, so it's going to have a burrow speed of 60. Then we come down here to saving throw bonuses. We're going to skip over those for now because I don't think this creature really is going to have any special saving throws. So we'll go down here to senses. In the senses box, this is where you can add things like passive perception, blind sight, dark vision, things like that. Our creature, I am going to give it tremor sense. If you are familiar with burrowing creatures in Dungeons and Dragons, typically they have something called tremor sense. Any creature that burrows through the earth or is connected to the earth can feel the vibrations and sense other creatures in the ground, right? So Ankegs, Umber Hulks, Purple Worms, Earth Elementals, creatures like that all have tremor sense, okay? So I'm going to give our creature tremor sense, and I'm going to make the distance 120 feet. So this thing is really good at feeling the vibrations in the earth, okay? And we're going to add that, and you're going to see it puts it up here in this little box right here. All the abilities and features and attacks and everything that we start giving this creature are going to start to pile up in this box over here, okay? Next over here is languages. If your creature speaks any special languages, you can add them here. There's a drop down for it, or if there's a language that's not in the drop down, you can just type it in and hit the add button. Of course, our creature is very unintelligent. I wouldn't expect it to know any languages, so we're going to leave that blank. Next up is skills. Again, this is a drop down, and just like a character, monsters can be skilled in different things like athletics, acrobatics, perception, stealth, any of those kind of things. If you have a creature that maybe sneaks up on its prey, you might want it to be skilled in stealth and have a special bonus to that. Again, I don't think this creature is going to have any special skills, but it is there if you would like to use that. The next section is important, and we are going to use this. The next section is damage modification, and this is where you add things like resistances and immunities, okay? If you know anything about demons in 5th edition, you know that almost all demons resist cold damage, resist fire damage, and resist lightning. You know that demons are also immune to being poisoned. You can't poison a demon. So we're going to add all of those traits in. So you come to this exception source window and you do the pull down, and we're going to say cold, and the type is going to be resistance, and we're going to add that in. You can see it puts it up here with our other abilities. We're going to select fire resistance, and we're going to add that, and we're going to select lightning resistance, and we're going to add that. Then we're going to select poison, and we're going to change resistance to immunity, and we're going to add that. Then we're going to go all the way down here to poisoned, and we're going to keep it on immunity, and we're going to add that. Okay? So you can see here, you have all the damage types at the top: acid, bludgeoning, cold, fire, so on and so forth. And then at the bottom, you have all of your conditions like blinded, charmed, encumbered, grappled, poisoned, paralyzed, all those things. And they're separated here in the middle by bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical weapons. If you are familiar with a lot of higher level monsters, you need to have a magical weapon to do damage to it. So if you want your monster to have that ability, you can add it in here as well. What we can do now is come down here to this button that says preview, and we can hit preview. And over here in this window, we will get a quick stat block preview of what our monster is going to look like. Okay, so we have our Hellspawn Burrower. It is a large fiend, a demon. It's chaotic evil. Has an armor class of 17. It has 112 hit points. It has a speed of 30 and a burrow speed of 60. Oh, it says hover. We accidentally checked the hover box, so let's uncheck that and update our preview. There we go. Hover's gone. Here are its statistics: strength of 16, dex of 12, con of 14, so on and so forth. And all of our damage immunities and resistances are in there, as well as the tremor sense. And our passive perception, it always puts passive perception in there. Ours is just 10 because it's, of course, 10 plus your wisdom, and our wisdom is 0. And it's challenge rating 5 monster, which is worth 1,800 experience. So we're off to a good start. Next, we need to add some abilities and some attacks, something for this creature to actually do. Okay, so we're going to come over to this button here that says add ability, and we're going to press on that. And it pops up a little window here where you can add any ability to the creature. I feel like this creature has these really hard armor plates on the back of the creature, but as I look at the miniature, it doesn't seem to have much armor on the belly of the creature. It looks like the belly is not armored at all, right? So I want to do something interesting with that. I want to give my players something kind of cool to do in this fight, and make this a little more than just a straightforward fight. So we're going to give this creature an ability called Soft Underbelly, right? And the gist of this is that if the players want to attack the creature in its underbelly here, it's going to have a lower armor class. It's going to be easier to hit down there than it is up top. But it's going to be more difficult to hit down there because, after all, that's the bottom of the creature. It's kind of crawling around on its belly. It's tough to get a shot in down there or to get a hit in down there. It's basically like the player is calling their shot, right? So if they attack the underbelly, then they're going to have to attack with disadvantage, all right? The armor class is going to be a little bit lower, but then we're going to allow them to do some extra damage if they hit. It's sort of like attacking the dragon and trying to find the chink in its armor, right? Trying to find the missing scale and attack the dragon where it's weakest. Okay, so the way we're going to word this ability is we're going to say that the Hellspawn Burrower has a soft underbelly. Enemies may attempt to hit the burrower in the belly by attacking with disadvantage. The armor class for this attack is 13. If the attack hits, it deals an additional 1d8 damage. And we'll go ahead and hit the save button here, and it'll add the ability in up here. And this is a good chance for us to talk a little bit about advantage and disadvantage. So let me pull up a table that I made to explain to you a little bit about how using advantage and disadvantage in the creation of a creature can affect things. So this table shows the probability of hitting on an attack when you roll normally, when you roll with advantage, and when you roll with a disadvantage. Let's say that we're trying to roll an armor class of 17. Well, on a normal roll, I would have a 20% chance of hitting that armor class. If I was rolling with advantage, that percentage goes up to a 36% chance. And if I have disadvantage, it goes all the way down to a 4% chance. Okay? So normally, when our players are attacking, if we don't take their attack modifiers into account, because those can be variable, if we just look at our armor class, when the players are normally trying to hit our burrower with his armor class of 17, they have a 20% chance of hitting. Okay? Now, with the soft underbelly attack, we've lowered that armor class to 13, but we're making them attack with disadvantage. So they only really have a 16% chance of hitting the underbelly. So we've actually made it more difficult, even though we've lowered the armor class, we've made it more difficult for them to hit the underbelly, right? But our payoff in this ability is that they get to do more damage if they hit. So the players will look at that and they'll say, well, it's going to be tougher. That's going to be a tricky shot to take. But if I make it, there's a little bit of a payoff. I get to do some extra damage. So I'm going to put a link to this table in the description so that you can use this as you're creating your monsters, and keep in mind the effect that advantage and disadvantage can have when you start to build that into your creatures. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is give our monster some attacks, some ways that it can attack our players back, right? So we'll start by hitting this button here that says add an action, okay? And that will pop up another little window that says add actions, and you can add weapon attacks, actions, multi-attacks, reactions. We're going to start with just a plain old weapon attack. As we said earlier, this creature has some mandibles here that we think it's going to attack with, and it also has a horn. We'll start with those mandibles. All right, and we'll name our attack mandibles. This is a melee attack, melee weapon attack. You can choose all the different attack types for this pull down here. Our creature uses strength as its main ability. So you have two options. Your characters can use strength or dexterity for their attacks. We're going to use strength. So as you see, I hit that button and immediately the to hit fills in with +6. Well, where does it get the +6? That comes from, again, our proficiency bonus, which is +3, and our strength, which is +3. From a strength of 16, so 3 + 3 is 6. The target for this attack will be one creature. Now you have to figure your damage, okay? And again, there are no hard and fast rules here. It can pretty much be whatever you want it to be. In general, a large creature will usually do 2 dice of damage. A medium or small creature will only do 1 dice of damage. Huge creatures and larger can do up to 3 or 4 dice of damage. All right, so we're going to say that our creature does 2d8. And again, I'm picking d8s because we're a large creature. Medium or smaller creatures, it might only be a d6 or a d4. But there's no rule here. If I wanted this attack to be pretty devastating, I can make those d10s. You can really do anything you want here. There's no rule. But again, as I keep saying, at the end, we're going to have to balance all of this out. All right? So you don't want to go overboard. The plus to damage, again, comes straight from the strength. So we've got 2d8 + 3. And the mandibles will be slashing damage. We'll choose that from this pull down here, right? Those mandibles will be slashing on the characters like that. This field here is kind of an open field for you to put anything that you would like in there. So let's say, for example, we thought that this creature had some poison dripping from its mandibles, right? And so it did some extra poison damage. We could add in and say, and 1d6 poison damage. All right, so we could add that in addition to the standard damage that the attack does, right? The reach here is just 5 feet. Larger creatures sometimes have a reach of 10 feet or more. You can change that here. If this was a ranged attack, you could put your medium range and long range in here, but this is not, it's a melee. So when you're done, you hit the save button. We'll update our preview here, and as you can see, we now have a mandible attack, which says +6 to hit, reach of 5, 1 creature, 2d8 plus 3 slashing damage, and 1d6 poison damage. All right. I'm going to go ahead and go back and get rid of that poison damage because I don't want this creature to do poison damage. I just wanted to show you how you could do that. So to edit that, we go back up to our list of abilities here. We select the Mandible's ability and we hit the edit button. It'll pop the actions window back up, and we can just go in and delete out that poison damage. And hit save. And we'll update our preview, and now as you can see, the poison damage is gone. Next, we're going to add the horn attack in. We'll hit the add action again. Our pop-up window will show back up for adding actions. We'll type in horn. Our type will again be a melee weapon attack using strength, so the +6 against 1 creature. And I don't feel like the horn would be as devastating as the mandibles, so we'll only have that do 1d8 as opposed to 2d8. And that'll be piercing damage as opposed to the slashing damage. Again, just a reach of 5, and we'll hit save. And then when we update our preview, we now have a horn attack and a mandible attack. And then the last thing we're going to do is give it one more action here, and that's going to be on this tab that says multi-attack. If you're familiar with 5th edition, around challenge rating 5 or so, most creatures get the ability to multi-attack. They get the ability to attack at least twice, right? So we're going to add in a multi-attack that says the Hellspawn Burrower makes 2 attacks. And you can edit this to say pretty much anything you want. We could make that say 3 attacks. We could make it say 1 horn and 1 mandible attack. We could specify that it has to be a horn and it has to be a mandible. A lot of times you'll see creatures that might have 2 claw attacks and 1 bite attack, right? So you can make that be anything you want. In this case, we're going to leave it as the default here as just the Hellspawn Burrower makes 2 attacks. We'll save that. I will move the multi-attack to the top because the formatting, usually the multi-attack is the first action. So we'll move it up above horns and mandibles. Hit preview, and there we go. We now have multi-attack, horns, and mandibles. So our creature's coming along pretty well. I want to do one more thing before we call this done. I want to go back and I want to add a second ability, okay? Because again, as a DM, one of the things you have to do is think about, how am I going to use this creature? How do I see this playing out in combat against my players? So I kind of see it that this creature is burrowing underground and it suddenly pops up underneath a character and makes a horn attack as it comes bursting out of the ground, right, and pierces a player. And then all the PCs kind of come on it and start beating up on it, and then it dives back underground and burrows, and all the players are running around like, where to go, where to go, where to go, and then all of a sudden it just, boom, pops up from underneath a player and pierces it with its horn again, okay? So I want to give it an attack that kind of simulates that kind of makes this creature, again, a little bit more dynamic, gives my players a little bit more of a challenge, right? So we're going to make it have an ability, and we're going to call it Burrowing Attack. So the way we are going to word this attack is that the Hellspawn Burrower can tunnel beneath a creature, emerge, and make a horn attack with advantage, right? This Hellspawn Burrower is popping up from underground. The players never see the attack coming. They have no idea it's coming. So the Burrower gets advantage on this attack. And if the attack hits, it deals an additional 1d8 piercing damage. So this is a special little attack we're going to give it. We'll hit save right here, update our preview one last time, and I think we're good now. We've got all of our abilities and actions added in. We have the soft underbelly, we have the burrowing attack, the multi-attack with the horn, and the mandibles. So right now, our creature is looking good. The only thing we have left to do now is to make sure that this creature is accurately built. So what do I mean by accurately built? Well, we've said that this is a challenge rating 5 creature, but are we 100% sure that it really is a challenge rating 5 creature? There's nothing worse than designing a creature and throwing it on the table and thinking that this is going to be a really awesome epic fight. And then you get about halfway through it and you find out you're just absolutely mopping up your players, right? You've created a creature that's too powerful and you're on your way to a TPK and nobody's having any fun because the creature is just way overpowered. Of course, you don't want the opposite of that either, where you create this creature thinking that it's going to be a great challenging fight, and then your players just come along and completely curb stomp the creature, right? And they alpha strike it and it's dead in 1 round. Not a challenge, no fun for anybody. So how do we make sure that the creature is actually the challenge that we designed it to be? Well, the first thing you have to do is start with a table that comes straight out of the Dungeon Master's Guide, actually. And if you have a Dungeon Master's Guide, on page 274 of the Dungeon Master's Guide starts a section on building your own custom creatures. And there's a table there that's very helpful, but it's a little bit tricky to use. So I'm going to show you how we use that table. So on page 274 of the Dungeon Master's Guide, you have a table called Monster Statistics by Challenge Rating. And the way you use this table is you have columns here for a defensive challenge rating and columns for an offensive challenge rating. You have to figure out what your creature's defensive and offensive challenge ratings are, take the average of those, and find out what your creature's total challenge rating is. So to use this table, we start by looking at the hit points column. Our creature, as we looked at it earlier, had 112 hit points. So looking on our table, a creature with 112 hit points is a challenge rating of 3. But we have to adjust our hit points a little bit. Remember when we said, well, 112 hit points seems a little low for a challenge rating 5 creature, and it is. But our creature also has a lot of damage resistances and immunities. Our creature resists cold damage, fire damage, lightning, it's immune to poison. Those resistances effectively give our creature more hit points because anytime it's hit with those kinds of attacks, it's only taking half the damage, right? So to account for the fact that it's taking half the damage, we have to kind of assume that its hit points are half as much more, okay? So what that means is we'll take its hit point total and we'll multiply it by 1.5. We'll give it 50% more hit points. So with 112 hit points, you add 50%, that becomes 168 hit points. Okay, and as we look on our table now, a creature with 168 hit points is about a challenge rating 7 creature. Okay, so we're actually pretty tough, right, hit point wise. Remember, we bumped those hit points up from 10 hit dice to 15 hit dice because we thought it seemed a little low. We might want to go back and adjust that, right? This is where using this table and making sure that our monster is accurately built is an important step in this process. I'm going to go back to my original thought that this creature should only have 10 hit dice, and I'm going to knock that back down. Now we only have 75 hit points again. Okay, I think my original thought was probably pretty accurate. So now that we've adjusted our hit dice back down to 10, we have 75 hit points. We go back to our monster statistics table. We take 75 hit points and add 50%. Now we're back at that 112 again, right? So that puts us back in this range, back at a CR3 creature. So we still have some adjusting to do though, because a CR3 creature should only have an armor class of 13, and our creature has an armor class of 17. How do we adjust for that? Well, for every 2 armor class that you're higher, you add 1 CR. So we are 4 armor class higher. Instead of 13, we're 17. So that means we're going to add 2 to our CR. So we go from a CR3 to a CR5, okay? So now we're more in the ballpark of what we were expecting. Our hit points are more in line, our armor class is accounted for, and our defensive challenge rating is now a 5. So we're more in line with what we thought we were building. We're a little more accurately built. But we still have to look at our offensive challenge rating. And there we start with what's called damage per round. And the way that you calculate this is you calculate how much damage your creature is going to do each round for 3 rounds, and then you take the average. Why do you do this? Well, because some creatures can do a variable amount of damage each round. Sometimes they have an ability that recharges, so you account for the fact that they're only going to do that ability once. Okay, like for example, a dragon with a breath weapon. You would count that in the first round it's going to use that breath weapon, and in the second rounds it's only going to attack with its claws and its bite. For our creature, we're not going to bother doing that because our creature is pretty much going to do the same attacks every time, right? We're going to assume that our creature is going to do its burrowing attack, right? Where it burrows underground and comes up and makes a horn attack. That's going to do 1d8 plus 3 piercing plus an additional 1d8. So that's going to do, as it says here, 7 plus another 5. So we're going to assume that that's going to do 12 points of damage with the burrowing attack. And it makes 2 attacks. So we're going to say it also gets a mandible attack in there and does another 12 points of damage. So every round, our creature is going to be doing 24 points of damage. All right? So we'll go back to our table, and we'll see that a creature that does 24 points of damage each round should be a CR3 creature. Okay? But a CR3 creature should have an attack bonus of about +4. Well, our creature has an attack bonus of +6. Again, just like with the armor class, we have to account for that by bumping up a CR for every 2 that our attack bonus is larger. So instead of a +4 attack bonus, we have a +6 attack bonus. So we're going to bump up to an offensive challenge rating of 4. So our offensive challenge rating is only 4. What can we do to adjust that and maybe get that challenge rating up closer to the 5 that we thought it was going to be? Well, there's a lot of different things we could do. Perhaps we could go back to that mandible attack that we had earlier, and we can edit that and put back that poison damage that we took off. Maybe that's not a bad idea. We could say that it does and 1d6 poison damage. Right? We'll add that in and hit save. Also, we could make our creature a little bit stronger, right? If we bump the strength up to 18, that's going to change the strength modifier to +4. So now, when we go to our horn attack and we edit that and use strength, our to hit is now +7 instead of 6. And our damage is +4, right? We'll do the same thing to our mandible attack. We'll edit that and use strength. And now our to hit goes up to +7. And our static damage goes up to +4. So we'll save that. And we'll update our preview. And now when we look at our creature, our average damage in 1 round now is going to be that burrowing attack, which does the extra d8 of piercing. So it's 8 plus an extra 5, so that's 13 points of damage. Our mandible attack is doing 13 points of slashing damage. That's 26. Plus it's doing an extra 4 poison damage. That's 30. So now we're doing 30 points of damage per round. We'll go back to our statistics by challenge rating table, and we'll see that a monster that does 30 points of damage per round is now CR4. Well, it would have an attack bonus of +5, but because we upped the strength, ours now has an attack bonus of +7. So we'll bump our challenge rating up 1, and now we've got a monster with an offensive challenge rating of 5, a defensive challenge rating of 5. Now we are very accurately built. This monster is probably a very good challenge for a CR5 creature. So at this point, I think we have a pretty well-built creature. This monster should be challenge rating 5, and it should pose a good challenge for your players. So there you have it. We've created a creature. It didn't take that long. It wasn't very hard. The tools that we used helped us. The tables and the books helped us. And in the end, we're able to make a challenge rating 5 creature that I think if you used this in your game, your players would really enjoy fighting this monster. I'm going to put a link to the final version of this creature that you see here, and that way you can download it and use it in your games at home. Drop me a comment and let me know how it works out for you. So what I really want to do with this series is I want to get you guys involved by asking you to post in the comments with pictures of creatures that you would like to see us build. Whether it's a miniature that you found that you need a stat block for, maybe you're an artist. What I'd really like to see is some cool artwork that you guys draw and post in the comments, and we'll create some creatures out of the cool stuff that you guys draw. Maybe you've found a picture on the internet of a monster that you would really like to have in your game, but you need a stat block for it. Any of this stuff, feel free to post it in the comments. I'll look through there. I'll find some of the more interesting stuff, and we will make future videos where we take your creatures and we stat them up and turn them into monsters that you can put into your games. So thanks again for watching. I hope you guys will like this video, subscribe, and check in, as I'm hoping to do these more often. Thank you very much for watching. Again, my name is Bill Buckhalter. You can find me at Buck Wiley DM on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching, and happy gaming.